Hi everybody, I'm Brianna and this is Winnie, my familiar. Winnie put his feisty pants on today, so he's feeling very feisty, and we are in our enchanted forest. She's covered in fall and it's just a really beautiful day. Today is going to be another episode in the familiar series, and the topic today is how to deepen your connection with your familiar. I'm going to be sharing 5 tips, 5 actions that you can take to deepen your bond and your trust with your familiar spirit guide. This is primarily going to be for those who have an animal familiar, but I will also be offering some alternative advice for those who might have a familiar that is land or a tree, another type of nature spirit. If you want to learn more about what a familiar is and how to come into union with your familiar, check out episode 1 in this series, and I will leave those links for you below. But just a quick little brief, a familiar is a conscious spirit guide that will show up in this earthly realm most often as a nature spirit to guide, protect you, and support you on your magical human path or your spiritual witchcraft path. So I've had 4 cat familiars and 1 other familiar, which we will talk about in another video, but growing up, I had a lot of pets. In fact, I always had 12 or more cats, which sounds crazy, and it is, especially since I'm allergic. But yes, I had 12 or more cats, but only one of them was my familiar, and he lived 16 years. His name was Soot as I was growing up, and so he was my first familiar. I received him when I was 3, and I had 3 more after him. So I have a lifetime of experience nurturing a connection with a familiar. But I also have experience nurturing a connection with your familiar while I was awakening and while I wasn't. And so I have a lot to share, and I have a lot of experience with the differences between nurturing a connection with a pet and with a familiar. And so that's going to be really obvious with all of these 5 tips. As well, as you deepen your connection with your conscious spirit guide, you will also be helping them expanding their consciousness. Especially if you are a witch who is on a path of awakening, you will inevitably begin to see your familiar begin to awaken with you. Remember, we are all spirits incarnating into this earthly realm, and your familiar is no exception. So there is an aspect of them that also can expand and awaken. They're not just this all-knowing spirit guide, they also have learning to do. And so as you deepen this connection, as you deepen your soul bond and soul awareness of each other, you will start to awaken together. And that can often look like your familiar, your animal, having more human qualities because you are so closely bound. If you've seen my videos, then you've probably picked up on the fact that Winnie is a particularly special cat, and he has very human-like qualities, and that our soul connection, our soul bond is really clear. It's really obvious in our videos. So that's actually a comment that I've received with all of my familiars, that they are very human-like cats. So let's talk about my 5 tips to deepen your connection with your familiar. Tip number 1 is eye contact. You may have heard that the eyes are the windows to your soul, and this is true in so many ways, particularly if you've experienced eye contact with a soulmate like a familiar or with a divine counterpart. When we're making eye contact with someone from within our soul family, there's this kind of energetic exchange that's letting each other know that we are bound in some kind of way. It's almost like as your eyes lock, there is telepathy happening where you're understanding each other and communicating with each other through your hearts and your souls. And this is obviously not something that we experience with everybody and with every animal or every nature spirit. This is really particular with people or animals that are within your soul family. The word familiar actually derives from the Latin word familiaris, which means a family, and so intentionally doing eye contact with your familiar is a game changer. Intentional eye contact allows us to create safety, trust, intimacy, and opportunities to deepen our practice of vulnerability. The eyes allow us to communicate without words or without our voice. Doing this can really help you deepen your understanding of each other's feelings, emotions, needs, and it just is a really great way to deepen your understanding and knowing of each other. All nature spirits speak the same language as your intuition, so intentional eye contact with your familiar is an opportunity to deepen your awareness of your intuition and how to connect with it and how to communicate with spirits on a soul level and create a deeper bond that way. And so doing this with your familiar will not only deepen your connection with your familiar, but it will deepen your connection with the universe, with yourself, and just with the spirit world in general. I feel like this is really important because even though familiars have a purpose to serve, guide, and protect us, we are also their caretakers, and so we have a responsibility to serve, guide, and protect them as well. So understanding our familiar's soul needs and how that translates into their physical, mortal life, that's really, really important as their caretaker and as a witch and as a person who has an understanding of their spirit and the spirit world. As well, nurturing a connection, any connection on a soul level, really allows us to lead from love and show up as a better version of ourselves. So when we are doing this with something like a familiar who is intentionally showing up in this life as our partner, this is so powerful and so profound. It's just a really, really beautiful and deep way to expand our soul awareness, expand our consciousness, and expand both a soul and a physical connection that's really meaningful to us and that really serves us in this life. So give this a shot and practice intentional eye contact with your familiar. It can take a few seconds or a few minutes, whatever it is. Sometimes Winnie and I lock eyes and then I take that intentional moment, like it happens maybe unintentionally, but then I let it continue intentionally. And Winnie is just the sweetest. When we're making intentional eye contact and I say, "I love you," he blinks slowly once, and that's his way of saying "I love you too," and then he becomes a total love marshmallow because he feels safe, he feels trust, and he can feel the connection as deep as me. But what if your familiar is not an animal and does not have eyes? I recommend then using another one of your senses to communicate with that familiar, and I recommend listening to that familiar's spirit. Hear their call and practice communicating through telepathy and just, your intuition, and begin to understand each other that way. Journaling through that practice can be really helpful because you can really begin to track your understanding of yourself and your familiar through that process. Hello, you are so cute. Tip number 2 is undistracted quality time. And I'm talking no phones, no to-do lists, one-on-one, undistracted, uninterrupted quality time together. Find ways to do this with your familiar. This will obviously be different for everyone depending on your lifestyle, where you live, and what you and your familiar like to do, but this is so, so important. There are a lot of benefits to doing this. It really shows your familiar that they're a priority and not your distractions. In fact, Winnie absolutely hates when I'm on my phone. He gives me side eye and he starts to get kind of feisty and he will literally just walk away. And if we're having our quality time together and I pick up my phone, he will just walk away and just be like, okay, well, I'm not a priority. This is a really good thing to practice to have presence, but really specifically doing this with your familiar will deepen your bond and give you more opportunities to witness each other and witness yourself and your familiar as your mirror. This is actually a practice that I intentionally began with my second familiar, Noelle. She really, really loved crystals, and so we would do crystal healing together, even if it was just for a few minutes. I would be very undistracted and super honed in on focusing on her and watching her really absorb and receive that crystal healing. So Noelle had kidney disease for the last 2 years of her life, and she probably lasted quite a bit longer than what would be normal, what would be typical for a cat of her age to have with kidney disease, but she really loved her crystal healing, and I feel that my undistracted, devoted attention to her during those moments really impacted her healing and really impacted her relaxation and her joy, and I think that that really did make a difference in how long she ended up living. With Winnie, this is an absolute everyday non-negotiable for us. So every morning, Winnie and I have undistracted, uninterrupted quality time together. And usually this lasts for about a half an hour, sometimes less, sometimes more. And it usually looks like us cuddling in bed or playing in bed. And it's just so, so important. And I really let Winnie take the lead. He knows that this is what we're gonna do, but I let him take the lead on how it ends up looking like. For example, he might wake up one day and just really want to seize the day and really get outside, and he also doesn't like using the litter box, so he might just need to go outside. Hello? Just talking about you. Hi. And so he might just want to go outside right away, and if that happens and we don't get our quality time in bed together, then we will take a walk or do something else throughout the day, but this is a non-negotiable for us. I actually had that exact same practice with my last familiar before Winnie, Binks, and so doing that right in the morning really helped us deepen our connection. And I would say that my connection with Binks and Winnie is probably the deepest connections that I've had with familiars. Our everyday non-negotiable practice doing this really contributed to how connected and bound we were. Tip number 3 is to include your familiar in your craft, and this is a really fun one because as you nurture the connection with your familiar, the spiritual and physical connection, you'll be able to begin to understand and know each other deeper. So this will allow your familiar to step into their role as your magical partner and begin to recognize when you need them to show up. So for this one, I use a combination of me being the guide and Winnie taking the lead. Winnie is only 2.5 years old, and he is a cat, and he is a very silly, spunky cat, and so he is still learning to tame his wild ways. And so I'm really teaching him how to step into his role as a magical partner, but as we deepen that connection between each other and he has his own understanding of me and my magical needs, he will start to move into that maturity and start to show up on his own accord. So for example, if I'm burning my herbs and my cauldron in the enchanted forest in the stone circle, as you've seen me do many times, and Winnie is not in sight, I can often sense that he is nearby, watching me, watching the smoke, and trying to figure out what is going on. And he will take his time moving forward, and he will come in and he will start to sniff everything out, and then he will feel the trust, he'll feel the safety, and he will sense what is going on, and that's when he will ground and he will move into his maturity in that moment as my magical partner, and he will help create the sacred space with me. But there are other times when he's just being a bad boy or just being a cat, and he is not paying attention to what I'm doing, and so I will take that opportunity to literally pick him up, bring him over to what I'm doing, and let him kind of suss everything out. Even if it's just for a few seconds, I'm letting him know that I want him to be by my side when I'm doing something like this, something energetic like this. Winnie is super sensitive, and he can always pick up on an energetic shift. So if I'm shifting energy with my craft, he will notice that. And so I often like to take the opportunity to kind of almost forcefully, show him this is what I'm doing. But then if he wants to leave, that's okay, because it's a practice, and over time he will be able to step into that role as my magical partner and show up at the right time. Another way that your familiar can partake in your craft is by offering you gifts. And this requires a little bit of a perspective shift. So maybe you're just a person who has a pet, and you see that your pet has shed a whisker, and you just sweep it up and put it in the garbage or whatever you do with it as a pet owner. But as a witch who has a familiar, if you see that your familiar has left a whisker behind, you can consider that a gift, collect it, and use it in your craft. I collect all of Winnie's whiskers and his claws, and I even use parts of his prey that he has brought me or left behind. Like if he has intentionally brought me a dead animal, I will sometimes bury it and then dig it up later and use parts of it, like the bones or the feathers or whatever it is. I consider that an offering, and I always know when Winnie is literally bringing me something as a gift to say, I got this for you, I love you. There is a difference between that and him just catching something. If you don't like outdoor cats, not my problem. This is something that Winnie does, and I really love when he brings me gifts. I obviously don't want to see animals die, but it is, you know, the cycle of life, and so I really embrace that part of being a outdoor cat owner. I also have the fur of all of my familiars, except for my first familiar because I was quite young when he died. I was 19. So yeah, so I have things from all of my familiars, and I consider them gifts and tools that I can use in my craft, and it allows me to bring in their energy into what I'm doing. Okay, tip number 4 is to learn their spiritual characteristics. This is a process of witnessing, and this is a really, really important aspect of a witch and familiar connection. Really take the time to understand your familiar spirit and how that translates into their physical being, and allow that to impact how you show up as their caretaker, and allow that to really impact your craft as well and how it can up level your craft. One of the ways that you can do this, a starting place, is to understand which life force energy they are dominantly coded in. So for example, Winnie is a divine feminine, but he also has a really healthy balance with his inner masculine. Winnie is delicate and he shows his emotions, but he's also really tough and resilient. Winnie is very, very sensitive and he loves to be taken care of, but he also really loves to show his love. Whether he's bringing me a gift or he's love bombing me in some kind of way, he is really a nurturer. He really thrives when he feels safe, and he's very goal-oriented, but he's also very patient in that process and seeing his goals through. And that really inspires me because we're each other's mirrors, and so me having the awareness about how he's doing that and why he's doing that really impacts me and my soul growth. So yeah, he's very patient, but not when it comes to his treats. Winnie needs his temptations when he wants them at the exact moment that he wants them. It's actually really funny. So for me, it's so obvious that Winnie is a divine feminine, but he also has a really healthy balance with his inner masculine, and I'm able to really witness that because my own spiritual practice has very much to do with understanding divine masculine and feminine energies. With Binks, on the other hand, he was a divine masculine. He was very independent and very dominant. He didn't like to be told what to do, and he really liked to be the leader. He also lingered in his shadows a lot longer than Winnie does as a divine feminine. Binks's masculine qualities really showed up when he particularly felt like our sacred space was being threatened, or when I was in physical pain, and we're gonna talk about that in just a few seconds here. So really taking the time to understand the spiritual characteristics and aspects of your familiar will really help you to understand their soul, understand their physical life, how they show up in this world, and it's just a really great way to also deepen your understanding of spirituality and your craft. Tip number 5 is to witness your familiar protect and heal you. So this is obviously another act of witnessing, and when we can witness our familiar protect and heal us within a specific moment, this is an opportunity to witness them shift energy and really show you the capabilities of their spirit. And this not only deepens your bond, but it can also really elevate your awakening. There have been many big and small moments where I've seen my familiars show up for me to protect me and to heal me. In fact, this is something that many pets just do, many animals do. Animals are so intuitive and they can really sense when someone is suffering or needs assistance, and so they will often just show up and try to comfort you. But with a familiar, the difference is that they're showing up for you in a spiritual way, on a soul level. And so when my familiar does this, I am truly feeling like I am seen, I am not alone on my spiritual journey, because the difference between a pet and a familiar within this circumstance is your familiar will see where you're struggling spiritually, and they will often interact with you energetically in a way that really allows you to go deeper within yourself and up level your awakening. This is one of the ways that a familiar will do this for us, is that they will descend with us and they will try to show up and protect and support us as we're descending, and they will also rise and ascend with us as well. Witnessing your familiar show up in a protective and a healing way is a really great way to witness their purpose. And this really allows us to be in kind of moments of awe, like, this is why they're here, this is why they've shown up for me. And it also really motivates us to grow ourselves and grow our spiritual awareness, so that we can really just continue to unravel and deepen that connection with our familiar, because it is really profound when we are able to witness and experience our familiars show up for us in that kind of spiritual protection, in that spiritual healing. So I have a few examples that I want to share with you from Winnie and Binks. I've mentioned a few times that Winnie is very, very sensitive. In fact, he's very much a baby. He's just so sensitive. But when it comes to our connection, he is able to utilize his sensitivities to see when I'm being sensitive or when I need support. So if I am extremely sad or when I'm crying, Winnie will witness me from afar, and I will see him watching me. He will express concern over his face and in his eyes, and then he'll move closer and sit close to me. Sometimes he'll move right onto my chest, but sometimes he'll just sit close to me, and I will witness and sense him shifting into his masculine energy in order to become a support system, a foundation for me. He is literally creating sacred space for me in order for me to feel safe, to feel seen. It's like an energetic work. They're doing energy work when they're doing this for us. And so Winnie will use his sensitivities in that way to really support me in my sadness. So another example is with Binks. When I had Binks, I experienced so much pain. I was really, really suffering. So a really clear example is when I had Binks, I had 2 concussions back to back within a few days of each other, and I really, really suffered, and I had literally no support except for my cat. And so Binks is very motivated by his outdoor adventures, and it was normal for him to be gone for, hours and hours at a time. But during this time that I was really suffering physically and mentally, he sat by my side every day, all day. He was there for me, and he really let me feel seen, because I just didn't have the support that I felt like I should have had. And so he showed up to say, I'm actually here for you, and I see you, I'm supporting you. Another example is when my sister was over. If there was tension between my sister and I, Binks really shifted energy. He would stalk her around the house, making low growling noises. Like, he would literally shift his whole back and kind of like stalk her, to the point where we were both like, what is he doing? Is there something wrong with him? I remember literally thinking like, oh my god, there's something wrong with my cat. Like, I have to take him to the vet. I have to get him scanned. There's something wrong. Why is he behaving like this? And then the more that he did it, the more that I understood that he was actually protecting me, because there was tension between my sister and I. Another example with Binks is I had a plant medicine situation gone awry, and it was absolutely life-altering. There's not enough words to describe the experience that I had, but during that night, Binks sat on the chair in the corner of my room the entire night watching me. He literally was just on that chair watching me the entire time. And I remember looking at him and thinking, he is supporting me. He's making sure that in this really vulnerable moment, I'm spiritually protected. And he just sat there and watched me. And that night was actually a turning point in my connection with Binks. Something really happened within our connection during that night. And for those of you who have been following my journey and who know that the number 16 is my spiritual number, that was on a February 16th. So, I mean, there's a lot to say there, but yeah. So being able to witness him step up for me in that way was really, really profound and created a giant shift within our connection. So in terms of a familiar that is not an animal and you want to witness them showing up for you in a time of need, really tap into your intuition and your telepathy with that familiar and allow their wisdom to be downloaded. So this is a way that you can connect with a familiar who really can't communicate with their eyes or with their mouth, or be there with you in person or something like that. Really tap into your spirit, your intuition, and your ability to telepathically communicate with another spirit, because that is a thing. It is a thing. And don't let anyone tell you it's not. So those are my top 5 tips on how to deepen your connection with your familiar. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment below and let me know how you connect with your familiar. If you had more to add to this, I definitely want to know, and please let other people know too. And if there are any topics that you want me to cover in this familiar series, then definitely leave a comment below. So thank you so much for watching, and Winnie and I will see you next time.